Alright guys, BLM here back with a new video, and in this video we're back with another casting video I'm remaking after 5 years, this one being what I believe is my most viewed casting video. Here I'll be remaking Jeff Probst's dream cast of Survivor, where here I'll be running through every season of the show and create a cast that I think Jeff Probst would put together if he had the end-all be-all say on who would be on this cast. Now, again, unlike the more recent casting videos I've been doing, this will not be in relation to Survivor 50 specifically. This is more so just, again, going through Survivor history, talking about Jeff Probst's favorite players, and, again, just making a cast full of them. So, again, we'll have 20 players on this list. So I will mention the fact that there will not be any Survivor 47 people included in this list. Obviously, Survivor 47 has started, and I'm sure we know quite a bit about Jeff Probst's opinions on some of these players. However, I'm filming this before Survivor 47 even airs. So, again, just no 47 people in this list. But anyway, let's start talking about cast here. We'll go through it in chronological order of when they originally played. So let's start off with Survivor Borneo. And straight up, I don't think anyone from Borneo makes the cut. I do think there are people that would be in consideration. I think Greg is someone that Jeff has been wanting back for quite a bit. Colleen is someone that is obviously this big enigma that, again, maybe he would like to have her back. But really, I feel like all the other big names from this season are people that he's not dying to see play again. Obviously, Richard Hatch, someone I don't think he's particularly interested in seeing again. Kelly Wigglesworth, I'm sure he was disappointed with after Cambodia. And again, Sue Hawk is someone that I don't think he's looking at too favorably anymore. And again, just the likes of like Jervis and Jenna are people that I don't think are particularly high on his radar. So again, I just feel like no one really makes the cut from Borneo. Same thing with Australian Outback, actually. I mean, I think there's at least a consideration for Colby in the sense that obviously he loved Colby back in the day. Now, obviously, we have heard that their relationship isn't the greatest in the modern day. Yeah, again, I feel like maybe there's that reverence there. And we do, again, know that he likes Atina, and I'm sure he recognizes the iconicness that Jerry is, though I just feel like at the end of the day, I don't think he picks anyone from Australian Outback either. Next up from Africa, and straight up, I don't think he picks anyone from Africa either. I think the only consideration here is Ethan, though I think after seeing him back on Winners at War, I don't know if Jeff really feels like he needs to see him back again. So he has always been very complimentary of Ethan, dating back since even like Heroes vs. Villains, and I do feel like he is someone that could be in consideration here. Yeah, I do feel like at the end of the day, again, I just left him off. Next from Marquesas, and there's one consideration for Marquesas, and he made the cut, obviously, and that's Boston Rob. And again, I just feel like it's very tough to believe a dream cast for Jeff Probst that doesn't include Boston Rob, where obviously, again, with this cast, it's not really pertaining to a specific theme. It's not really even trying to be a somewhat realistic cast outside of, again, I am going to include diversity mandate just for the sake of it. But again, I think when we're just talking about, again, who does Jeff Probst love and who would he ideally like to see play Survivor again, I think Boston Rob is obviously still high on that list, where, again, a pretty simple pick there. Next up for Thailand. And next up for Amazon, where, again, I don't think anyone from Amazon really makes it on either. Again, I think you could talk about Rob Cesternino as a potential person, though I don't know if he's someone that, like, again, makes the top 20 of people that Jeff Probst would want to see play again right away, where, again, did not put him on. Next up for Pearl Islands, and Pearl Islands is interesting here because obviously there's one massive name in Sandra who, again, I could think this is like a big legend season. If this was some sort of theme season, I think for sure Sandra makes the cut. However, I think for, again, a cast of just Jeff Probst's favorites, I don't know if Sandra makes the cut right now. I think we're in a spot where, I mean, there's a lot of more recent picks to go through, to where, considering that fact, I do feel like Sandra is someone that's probably going to be left behind of these, like, big legends of the game. So while he did name her in his Mount Rushmore, I feel like Sandra's never been a person that he has been particularly impressed by outside of just the notion that she's won twice, to where, again, even then, he kind of poo-pooed both of her previous wins, where, again, had this been more of like a legend style cast, she definitely would have made it on. But again, just when looking at the board, I just feel like there's too many other people I think Jeff would rather see play again than Sandra, so again, I did not put her on. And again, obviously you got other considerations like Rupert and Andrew Savage that could be a consideration, yet neither of them made it on either. Next up for Vanuatu, and again, no one really made this cut either. I think the only person I would consider is Twyla. I mean, Jeff was very complimentary of Twyla at the time. We know Twyla's been in the running many times in the past, though. Again, I don't think she makes the cut here. Next up for Palau. And there's three major considerations from this season. I mean, obviously you got Tom Westman, who he loved at the time. But again, a lot of time's gone on, and obviously Tom wasn't in consideration for Winners at War. So again, I think that's pretty damning in that light. Also, you got Ian, who is someone that he really loved at the time as well. Again, has been trying to get Ian to come back for years. However, again, I think when just looking at the board, I feel like there's probably other people we would rather see back at this point, to where, well, again, I'm sure he would be very happy to have Ian back. I just feel like when we're looking at a dream cast, I feel like it's not really someone that would make the cut. And the same thing goes with Stephanie LaGrossa, who again is someone that I think he would be fine if she came back. Again, another one that I think would be a shoo-in if it was a legend season. Yeah, again, I think when we're looking at this list specific to Jeff, I feel like she's someone that, again, does not make the cut right now. Next for Guatemala, and really the only consideration would have been Danny. Yet again, we're in the post Winners at War world where, again, have not heard him talk about Danny since then, even though he was very complimentary of her leading up to that season, and he hasn't talked about her since. So again, I very much doubt she'd be in contention now. Next for Panama, we're finally adding someone to the list again. I mean, again, I think here you could consider someone like a Terry, though again, I don't think he makes the cut, but I think very clearly Suri makes the cut. I mean, Suri is a player that to this day he still mentions pretty frequently. He does talk about her balance beam moment. He was very complimentary of her when she was about to go on BB25, to where, again, I think Suri is someone that is definitely in consideration here, to where, I'll be honest, like, of the legends that end up making the cast, I feel like Suri is probably the one I'm the least confident in of those. Yet, again, I feel like Suri is still someone that would be pretty high on his board, to where, again, I decided to put her on. Next up for Cook Islands, and there were a lot of considerations here. I mean, obviously you got Yule, who is a winner that he's always particularly liked. He's always praised Yule as one of the smartest people to ever play, and again, I did consider Yule for this list. Again, he just did not make it on. There's just, again, too many men. What a shocker for Jeff Probst to consider, to where, again, from the men's side of things in particular, it's very difficult to narrow down this list. While beyond that, again, you got like Ozzy, though, to be fair, by the time of Game Changers, he was not particularly high on him, to where, again, don't think he makes the cut. Penner, someone that I really want to make the cut here. I was really hoping I could squeeze him in. Yeah, again, just not enough slots. But the person from this cast that did make the cast is obviously Parvati. And again, this is just undeniable. But obviously, it's just Parvati is the female Boston Rob to Jeff. I mean, she's just someone that, again, he adores. He talks about her as the best player of all time. He really gives her a lot of credit for things that she didn't even do, to where, again, I think it's very clear he loves Parvati. And I think no matter what the circumstances are around this dream cast, I feel like she always ends up making the cut. And for Survivor Fiji, and again, no one really makes the cut. I mean, we know Earl's been in the running more recently. I just do not feel like Earl is someone that Jeff particularly is high on, considering, again, he even called him one of the most boring winners at the time he was villain. So again, I don't think Earl is in the running here. Next up for Survivor China, and once again, no one made the cut, though I did consider Amanda. I mean, obviously Amanda is someone that has played numerous times, and again, he has praised, even though he's also kind of bashed on her game at points too. But still, I mean, I think he likes Amanda, but again, did not make the cut here. Also, I did consider Todd, which might not be a popular opinion, considering obviously Todd has had so many opportunities to come back at this point and has never been actually picked. And I think through that, you would assume that, oh, that just means Jeff doesn't like him, when I don't think that's the case. Where, I mean, like, I remember back in his season ranking for Survivor China, he was praising Todd. I know since then, again, he's praised Todd here and there, again, during the very few times he talks about him, to where, again, I did think he likes Todd, but again, obviously not enough to make this cut. Next for Micronesia, and again, when looking at the fans of it all, I don't think anyone makes the cut. Again, Eric is someone to consider, but again, not really close to making it. And for Gabon, obviously, same thing. I don't think there's a single person to even talk about from this cast that Jeff would even consider. But next up for Tocantins, and this is where it gets a bit interesting, because I do think there are some people to consider, obviously. I think you got JT, who at the time of Game Changers, I think could definitely be in consideration for this. I mean, Jeff was very complimentary of JT coming into Game Changers, to where, again, I could see a world where he would make a cut, though, obviously, since then, I mean, there supposedly were some things in Ponderosa that production did not like, to where, considering that and the fact that he wasn't in consideration for Winners at War, and I think it's pretty clear that he's kind of off this list now. Outside of that, again, also going to consider Tyson. Now, again, I think he likes Tyson, though I never really got the sense that he loves Tyson. Where obviously when he talks about Tyson nowadays, he does praise Tyson. But I do feel like he was kind of subdued around his opinions of Tyson at the time of Blood versus Water, when he actually won, and I feel like in the lead up to that, again, he was not particularly high on Tyson. So I think he recognized how good of a character Tyson is. Yeah, I never really got the sense that he personally was this person that really loved Tyson and wanted to keep on bringing him back. So again, I think there's a world where he makes the cut, obviously. Yeah, I think, again, when the male field here is just so tight, I feel like Tyson did not make the cut. And the other person that didn't make the cut was shockingly Coach. And again, this was tough. Where Coach is probably one of the tougher cuts on the board here, where really it comes from this debate of like, how new era focused is this grouping going to be? And I decided to be pretty new era focused, where considering like how involved Jeff is in the current casting of the show, and obviously how recent these people are in his mind, I did decide to go with a decent chunk of new era people, which ends up leaving Coach out of the cut here. Now again, there's definitely a world where Coach makes the cut, especially if Jeff like really sit down and put a cast together. I just feel like if Jeff were to just like ramble off some names that he would like to see back, I do feel like Coach is not in the top 10 of men that he's going to mention right away, to where, again, again, I did feel like Coach is someone that, again, could definitely make the cut. He definitely loves Coach. I decided to leave him off this list. Next up for Samoa, I mean, no one makes the cut. I mean, there's not really much to talk about. Maybe Shambo could be consideration, but again, obviously he's not particularly fond of Russell anymore, to where, again, no one makes the cut. Same thing with Nicaragua. I mean, the only consideration would be Fabio. I mean, he was very high on Fabio at the time. Yeah, outside of that, I don't think he's particularly high on anyone from this cast. Then again, considering Fabio did not make it on Winners at War, again, he did not make it on here. Next for Redemption Island, and I mean, again, of the newbies, I mean, you can consider someone like Philip, though I feel like Philip's time's kind of passed, and I feel like someone like Coach is probably higher in Jeff's estimations at this point than Philip. I think the major consideration would be Andrea, though I think it's also a spot where, like, it's been a bit, I think there definitely was a point where Andrea is kind of his, like, new Parvati to a degree of this person he would really try to hype up, but I feel like, again, that time's kind of passed. I mean, it has been over 12 seasons since the last time she played, to where, again, I don't know how fresh she is in his mind anymore, to where, again, there's definitely a world where she does make the cut, but I decided to just leave her off. Next up for Survivor South Pacific, and here we got two major considerations. I did not put on Sophie, though. I mean, I think Sophie is someone that he has definitely gotten fonder of over time, while he was not necessarily a big Sophie fan at the time. I mean, he was very complimentary of her in the lead up to Winners at War, to where, again, I think she could be in consideration, but again, not really enough to crack the top 10. Though the person that makes it on is obviously Cochran. I mean, obviously. Cochran will never play Survivor again. Yeah, again, if this is Jeff Probst's dream cast, I mean, Cochran is, like, undeniably on. I think Cochran actually might even be a bigger lock than Boston Rob at this point, to where I think Cochran's probably his, like, #1 dream get, to where, again, I thought that was a pretty easy pick there. Now for One World, and again, not really anyone is truly in contention here. I mean, while, again, he is a big fan of Kim, I do not feel like Kim made the cut on a cast like this. Also, again, he likes Sabrina and Chelsea. I don't feel like they make the cut. And the other person that he really liked from the season was Troy Zan, who I assume he was disappointed with in Game Changers, to where, again, no one makes a cut here. Next for Philippines, and again, a few people to consider here. I mean, Lisa is someone that he obviously really loved at the time. I mean, she was even his co-host for Jeff Probst show, to where, again, she's definitely in consideration, though. Again, I feel like to him, there's bigger priorities at this point. Also, obviously consider Malcolm, though, again, like Andrea, I feel like enough time has passed to where I don't know if Malcolm's really his go-to person anymore, to where, again, he did not make the cut for me either. Next for Karamoan, where all to consider is the fans of Karamoan. So moving on. Next up, we got Blood versus Water. And again, there's definitely considerations here. I mean, the big one is obviously Sierra. I mean, he loves Sierra at the time. Obviously brought her back 3 times over the course of an 8-season stretch, which is pretty insane, to where, again, definitely consideration. I did not put her on. Again, I just feel like there's too many new era people that he's probably more fond of at this point, where, again, there wasn't really a slot for her. Yet again, another one that is, like, pretty close to making the cut. Another person considered Brad Culpepper, who he obviously loved at the time of Blood versus Water. I mean, he was on last name basis right away and really was trying to get him back on the show, to where, again, by the time he does come back in Game Changers, I don't know how he feels about him by that point. I mean, it does seem like by the time the season ended, he was kind of annoyed by him. Or again, they seemed a bit frosty by the time of the reunion show, to where, again, not entirely sure how Jeff feels about him now, though, again, at least someone to consider, considering he did love him at the time. Except for Kageon, and surprisingly, no one from Kageon made the cut here. Obviously, Tony's someone to majorly consider here. Obviously, he does love Tony, but again, I feel like Tony's not someone that is, like, deeply personal to Jeff. I feel like you very rarely hear Jeff go out of his way to praise Tony in the way that he does with Rob, Parvati, and Cochran, to where, again, while Tony, again, could be in consideration, I just feel like, again, right now, there's probably bigger priorities of people he would like to see back. Also, Spencer, someone that consider here. Again, Spencer, someone he loved at the time. Even by the time of 40, again, they were wanting to bring him back. I don't know where he is with Spencer right now. I mean, obviously, again, it's been a lot of time since his last appearance, to where I don't know how fresh Spencer is in his mind right now, to where, again, considering just how many new era people there are that, again, Jeff clearly wants to bring back, I just feel like they were better picks than Spencer. Also considers Tasha, who, again, he very much liked at the time as well, yet also kind of a similar thing of it being just too much time. And now the other person to consider is Sarah Lucina. Now, straight up, she was not really that close to making the list. Yeah, I do think by the time of Winners at War, I think he was pretty impressed by her by the end of that season, where we even get this big spiel about calling her Lucina. But again, at the end of the day, I don't think she was really that close to making the top 10 of women that he would put on a cast. Next up for San Juan del Sur, and this one was tough as obviously there are 3 legends of the game that come from this season, and none of them made the cast here, though obviously I did very much consider 3 people here. First up, obviously we got Natalie Anderson, and again, Natalie Anderson is someone that he was super high on at the time of Winners at War. Again, he was really happy with how she was able to play on the edge and really hyped her up as this, like, physical beast in the game, where mixing that and the fact that he was also very high on her after San Juan del Sur as well, with her being one of his only highlights of San Juan del Sur, a season that he did not particularly like. I do feel like, again, Natalie's definitely in the conversation. But again, I did decide to focus a lot more on New Era here, or at least players that have played a lot more recently, to where when looking at the legends of the game, I really only kept the big names that Jeff absolutely adores. So because that Natalie didn't make it, now I did not put on Jeremy. And again, Jeremy is someone that, again, could make the cut. Very much in consideration. However, he's kind of in this like Tony mold of someone that, again, he clearly likes. And again, in an ideal world, probably would make a cast. Yeah, I do feel like, again, when we're only having 10 slots here, I feel like there are 10 other people that I feel like are bigger priorities for him than bringing back Jeremy. So again, Jeremy didn't make the cut. The other one that didn't make the cut is Kelly Wentworth. And again, Kelly Wentworth, someone that he obviously loves as well. Really loved her after Cambodia. Still pretty high on her by the time of Edge of Extinction. Again, I think she's still someone that's in the conversation. However, I think at the end of the day, when looking at how many people from New Era, he's probably higher on at this point. And when looking at the more like legends of the game, I feel like there are other legends of the game that he talks about more nowadays, where I don't feel like he really talks about Wentworth that often anymore. Or while I think there definitely was a period of time where Wentworth was, again, like the new Parvati/Andrea, I don't feel like that's really where we're at right now. Again, she did not make the cut. Next up for Worlds Apart. And Worlds Apart's a cast that he really loved at the time. I mean, at the time of Worlds Apart, he was talking about this being the best newbie cast of the show. Obviously, as time goes on, again, that has not particularly aged that well, to where I think he saw the negative reception to this season, and he himself started to buy that. To where, again, I don't think he particularly loves this cast anymore. Though considerations here, again, Mike Holloway, someone he loved at the time. Again, that didn't really stick, considering, again, there were two major opportunities to bring him back, and they didn't do so for either of them. So, again, I don't think he makes the cut. Also, Carolyn is someone that he was very high on at the time, wanted to bring her back after Game Changers. Yeah, again, so much time has passed, I don't think she makes the cut anymore. Also, I very much considered Shireen, another person he really liked at the time. Yeah, again, I just feel like time has not aged particularly well there. Well, I don't think Shireen's particularly high on his radar anymore. And obviously, you got to mention Joe, who, again, he was super complimentary of even at the time of Edge of Extinction, and even after all the controversies, to where, again, who knows how he feels about Joe nowadays. We haven't heard him talk about him essentially since the postseason of Edge of Extinction. So again, maybe he's not as high on him anymore, which is really the reason why he didn't make the cut, as if it wasn't for that, he probably would make the cut. Yeah, again, I decided not to put him on the cast. Next for Ko Wrong, and no one from Ko Wrong made the cast here, despite obviously there being a lot of considerations. Again, Michelle Fitzgerald is someone that he was high on after Winners at War, where again, she would be in the conversation. Yeah, again, not on. Same thing goes with Aubrey, who, again, he really loved at the time of Ko Wrong, and was clearly disappointed that she didn't win. Yeah, again, I did not put her on. I would also consider Ty, where, I mean, I think there is a lot of talk about how with Ko Wrong, Jeff was just like so upset that Aubrey didn't win, when in reality, it's more so him being upset that Michelle did win, as really, again, like in most times where he's talking about that final vote situation, he doesn't actually say that Aubrey should have won. He more so implies that he thinks both Aubrey and Ty played better games, where, again, I think Ty is definitely in the conversation. Obviously a big fan favorite at the time. He, again, did not make the cut. And same thing goes with Sydney as well, someone that, again, he was very high on at the time, had been wanting to bring back, though she would say no, to where, again, I think she'd be in the conversation. Yeah, again, did not make the cut. Next up for Millennials vs. Gen X, and no one made the cut from this cast either. Now, again, considerations here, obviously, from like David Wright, someone he very much liked at the time. Yeah, I don't think makes the cut. You got Jay was someone he really liked at the time. Yeah, again, I think just too much time has gone on. And a big consideration here is Zeke, to where actually Zeke did make my initial cut of this list, to where, again, I was just under the assumption that he still loves Zeke. Obviously, Zeke was someone that he adored at the time of Game Changers, and they seemed to have a pretty good relationship. But again, obviously, like, Zeke was very upset at production for the IOI incident, and again, recently learning that Zeke had been blocked by Survivor on social media. I mean, again, that's not a particularly good sign for Zeke's returning chances, so again, I did not put Zeke on there. Next for HHH, and there's really only one consideration from this cast, but that person made it on, despite the fact that I wouldn't want them to make it on, but that person is Ben. And again, I do not need to see Ben ever again. However, Jeff would like it. Again, Jeff clearly loves Ben. Despite the fact that he quit in Winners at War, again, Jeff still continued to praise Ben. Even had him in his Mount Rushmore in a preseason interview leading up to Winners at War. Again, like after the season had filmed, again, knowing that Ben quit the game, he still listed Ben in his Mount Rushmore in Survivor history alongside Rob, Parvati, and Sandra, which is just insane. To where, again, I think Jeff adores Ben. Now, again, he hasn't really talked about Ben more recently. I feel like we haven't really heard him talk about Ben since the aftermath of Winners at War. Yeah, again, he adored him at the time, to where I feel like, again, if we're going with a new era, quote-unquote, legend of the game, I feel like Ben is someone that would be high on his board. So again, he made the cut here. Next up for Ghost Island, and there's a few considerations. None of them made the cut. I mean, Wendell was a major one, obviously. I mean, Wendell's something he really loved at the time. I mean, Jeff had talked about that. Wendell's like one of the few people that he pegged to win preseason, did go on to win, where, again, I think he clearly likes Wendell. I do think, again, considering the casting pool here, it's a bit of a tough board. Again, I think there's definitely where Wendell makes the cut. Though I decided to go with a decent chunk of people that have only played once, which end up knocking him out. Though, again, there's definitely where Wendell does make a cut. Obviously, through that, you also got to consider like someone like a Dominic. Even Donathan is someone that Jeff really loved at the time. But, again, really, I don't think either of them make it on. Next for Dave vs. Goliath. And, I mean, there's a few major considerations here. I mean, obviously, Mike White is someone that he really loved, considering they were friends before the show. There's definitely a world Mike White makes his cast. To be honest, I very much consider putting him on just for the sake of the notion of having Mike White on your cast again. Where, considering Mike White is obviously probably a lot more famous now than what he was at the time, I mean, I do think that would be something that Jeff would be into. Yeah, again, I decided just to not go that route. But the route I did end up going is the two people that you would expect to be here, which, I mean, straight up, I mean, from this point forward, again, while this is a Jeff Probst dream cast, really a lot of these people are people that I could just legitimately see him casting for 50. These are all just people that he clearly likes, all people that, again, if they want it, they're on 50 probably, to where it really ends up being a more traditional casting video from this point forward, but again, we'll still talk through it. Anyway, first person, obviously, is Angelina. I think Angelina is someone that he adored at the time, talked about her at the time of the airing of Dave vs. Goliath. That's the person he most wants to see play again. Again, Angelina was very clearly high on his radar at the time. Now, again, I don't know how much time has really favored her from Jeff's point of view, but still, I do feel like, again, considering how openly he loved her at the time, I did feel like she was an easy pick. And the same thing goes with Christian, where I think Christian's even more of a lock nowadays. I mean, Jeff still constantly makes references to Christian. So while Christian is someone that, again, is a bit further back at this point, I do think Christian is definitely high on his radar, and Christian was a pretty easy pick here. Next up for Edge of Extinction, which is a cast that, again, there's some considerations. Again, Chris Underwood is someone that he was very complimentary of him making these moves at the end, and I'm sure he's very happy that he kind of justified the existence of Edge of Extinction. Yeah, again, I don't think he makes the cut. Also, someone like Reem is someone that he very much liked at the time, and also loved her justifying the Edge of Extinction, and her having this big journey on there. Yeah, and I don't think she makes the cut. The person that does make the cut, though, is obviously Rick Devens, because, again, obviously, like, I feel like Jeff has gone so far out of his way to really praise Rick Devens at this point, and talking about how he would have brought him on as this, like, fire token vendor in his original plan for 41, and obviously having him as the initial host of the On Fire podcast, where, again, I think it's very clear he loves Rick Devens, so, again, pretty easy pick there. Next up for IOI, and I did not go with anyone from IOI. I think someone that would at least be in pretty deep consideration is Elaine. I know he very much loved Elaine at the time, and I think she would at least be in the conversation, and Lauren Ashley Beck is another one that I know he liked at the time as well. I think they would at least be in the conversation. Yeah, I don't think either of them make the cut at this point. And now we're moving on to New Era, and we're starting off New Era, Survivor 41, where no one made the cut. Now, obviously, there are people to consider here. I mean, Xander is someone that he was very complimentary of with the Knowledge is Power play, and I think just in general, you could tell production particularly liked Xander at the time. Again, I just think he's been kind of overshadowed since then, so he doesn't make the cuts. Shan is someone that is interesting here, in the sense that obviously Shan is someone that got a big edit, and again, production clearly brought a lot of good TV at the time. Yeah, I don't know how much that has aged. I don't know what production really thinks of her now, where you also don't hear Jeff ever talk about Shan on the On Fire podcast, where he's made numerous references to all of the people we're going to be talking about following this. Yeah, again, Shan is someone that just seems to be forgotten about from him at this point, to where, again, I did not put Shan on. A deeper consideration for me, especially for, again, a Jeff Probst Dreamcast, is Evie, where, again, I very much considered it. I mean, if Evie was on, it probably would have to be in the spot of potentially Angelina, or really a later person that we'll be talking about that I think is a bigger lock at this point, to where, again, Evie was definitely in the conversation. Yeah, I think at the end of the day, again, I just don't really feel like he talks about them that often outside of just their memorization of the puzzle, to where, well, again, he loved them at the time. I just feel like they're not really someone that is mentioned too often nowadays. But with that, we move on to 42, where we have 3 people from this cast on the cast here. And really, these are the three people that I think would be mainly in consideration. I mean, obviously, you can talk about the likes of like Omer and Mike. Yeah, really, I think the main contenders here are all the people that made it on. I mean, first up, you got to talk about Marianne. I think Marianne's a shoe-in for this cast. I mean, he talked about Marianne as one of his favorite winners at the time. I think Marianne also is kind of just the epitome of the modern new era casting style of her just having really everything that you would want from Jeff's perspective, of her still being this, again, fun presence, but one that has a touching backstory, someone that is a massive fan of the show, someone that's willing to play pretty hard. Where, again, I think at the end of the day, Marianne seems like a perfect pick here. Then we get to one of the bigger question marks for me. I think this is someone that, again, I very much wavered on if he still makes the cut anymore. So, again, this is the type of person where, again, it was a debate between him and someone like a Jeremy or a Tony or even like a Wendell. I wanted this person just because, again, this is a more recent player, one that he very much praised at the time, and that person is Jonathan. Where, again, I think Jonathan's in the kind of a weird spot here in the sense that he was from one of the earlier New Era seasons, and he's someone that, again, like gets mentioned here and there, though not constantly by Jeff, to where I'm a bit unsure if he's really like at the top of Jeff's radar right now yet, considering the fact that, again, he was so high on Jeff's radar at the time of 42, where he was really singing his praises from how good of a competitor he was, and again, you can clearly tell he like being called like Mr. Jeff by Jonathan. I feel like there's enough there to have him on this list here. And the final person we're going to put on is another person that, again, he clearly loved at the time. He still makes references here and there to her. So, again, I think it's enough to be on this list, and that person is Drea. To where, again, he clearly loved Drea at the time. I think Drea is, again, kind of the epitome of what he likes from modern Survivor. Again, having this player that's willing to play very aggressively, find advantages, and play, again, a cutthroat game, yet also recognize that the game is a game, at least from how she's portrayed on the show. To where, again, you can very much tell how much he liked Drea at the time. He still does make references to Drea on the On Fire podcast as someone that he likes. So, again, I think Drea is in the conversation here. Now, I think there's a world where you could swap her out with certain people. Though I feel like of those potential contenders, I feel like Drea is probably the person I feel the most confident in. So, I guess she made the cut here.
Now for 43, where two people end up moving on from this cast.
Where obviously to talk about 43 is the fact that there were these three big names at the end of the season that production very much liked, only for none of those three to get to the end, which like kind of left them a bit upset over how this season played out. And in general, again, Jeff kind of voices disappointments with 43, how stagnant the gameplay was at points, to where,
again, those three were the main considerations. The only two of them ended up making the cut. Now, outside of them, I did consider Noelle.
I think Noelle was someone that you could very much tell, again, he likes her story. He loves the underdog moment for winning the challenge. Yeah, again, I don't know if that's really enough to make his dream cast.
But obviously, of the big three, the one that did not make it on the cast here ends up being Cody,
who, again, he loved at the time. I think you could clearly tell that Cody's one of his favorites. I just feel like as time goes on, I don't know how memorable Cody is going to be, especially from, again, if we're going specifically from Jeff's point of view, to where I just feel like there's other people that are bigger priorities for Jeff than Cody. To where, while he likes Cody, I don't know if Cody is up there amongst his like all-time favorite players, to where, and Cody did not make the list.
Now for the people I did put on, first up, we do have Jesse. And I will say, it was actually a bit closer than what you might think, in that my initial draft of this list actually didn't have Jesse on the list. I did very much contemplate over whether or not Jesse is someone that Jeff Probst himself would pick to be on this cast. However, I did end up landing him here, and again, it was at the sacrifice of a certain other person we'll talk about down the road. He's talked about very positively more recently, yet I do think, thinking back at like all the times that Jeff talks about the Jesse Cody dynamic and how cutthroat of a move he made, along with also even having previously said that Jesse cutting Cody is a Hall of Fame move, it really does make me lean towards Jesse being on his Dreamcast here. While I did very much consider not putting him on, he did end up actually making the cut here. And the other person to make it on the cast here was somehow more of a shoe-in, even though, again, I think Jesse's someone that's mentioned a lot more recently. And I did end up putting Carla, and Carla's someone he clearly very much liked at the time, very much praised her in most interviews he was doing at the time of 43, to where, while again, I do think Carla is not someone that is really mentioned that much in the modern day in recent interviews from him, I do feel like Carla is still someone that is pretty high on his board, and considering the women field isn't as competitive, there's Jeff's favorites, I did feel like Carla was someone that still was qualified enough to make it onto the cast here.
Next up for 44, and 44 has always been a cast that I'm a bit conflicted on in how I assess the cast, because again, I don't personally like the cast of 44 that much, but Jeff does, so I don't know how many people make this cut. I mean, I only put two people on. Yeah, I think this could be a bit inaccurate in a realistic setting. Though, again, people I consider but did not put on. Again, Heidi is someone, again, he did praise at points. I think she's someone that he does like, but again, did not make the cut. Lauren Harp, another person, very much liked her. Did not make the cut either. And I could see a world where you could like replace her with someone like a Drea. But I feel like Drea is someone that was mentioned more after her season than Lauren was. Franny is someone that was also very much a consideration. Someone that I think Jeff very much likes, though did not make the cut. However, the real people here to talk about are the Tika 3. And again, I only put 2 of the Tika 3 on. The person I did not put on was Carson. Now, obviously, again, there's definitely a world where Carson is on a Dreamcast, and I just don't fully know. Yeah, again, I think it's a spot where like Carson, again, barely didn't make the cast. Again, we're very much in consideration. Really, before 46, I think they probably would have made the cast. Yeah, I think after 46 it became tougher to fit him in. So again, I think it's still someone that Jeff clearly likes. But the 2 people I did put on, again, we're both pretty much locks. So again, we got Jam Jam. Again, another person that Jeff very openly talked about as one of his favorite winners. Talked about loving his initial conversation with him, and clearly just has a soft spot for Jam Jam. And again, considering also his love of the Tika 3 just in general, I feel like Jam Jam was just such a lock on a cast like this. And the other person is one of the biggest locks on the board. You got Carolyn. And again, he pretty openly talked about Carolyn being one of his favorite players and constantly referenced her post-show. Again, we even got a reference to her in the 46 after show, along with numerous references to her on the On Fire podcast. So where, again, Carolyn is pretty much the biggest name of the new era. I feel like she is someone that is pretty much the biggest lock on the board here from the new era, to where, again, pretty easy pick there. Next, I'm moving on to 45, and 45 is a bit of a tough season here, where I do think he likes a lot of this cast. However, again, just determining who exactly makes the cut was a little bit difficult. And people I did consider did not make the cut. I mean, I did very much consider Katura, who, again, is not one of these people that has this like big inspirational moment that he really likes. And again, I think she kind of also perfectly fits into his new era casting type of someone that has this like big inspirational story, but someone that's going to play the game and someone that is a fan of the show. To where, again, I think she's in consideration, yet she did not make the cut. Very much considered Drew, and I think Drew is probably the biggest shocker to me that did not make the cut, where I very much expected Drew to make it on. Yeah, again, I just think when looking at the men field, it's very tough to put him on.
Now, again, he was someone that was contending with the spot with Jesse, also a certain other person for following season. And again, I very much wanted to try to squeeze Drew into this cast, but I didn't feel like it really made sense for some of these other people to not make it on. Where I think practically, I guess you could say, like a Christian or Rick Devens would be fighting for the slot with Drew, but I do think Jeff would genuinely cast Christian and Rick Devens over Drew, to where while I do think I contemplated Drew quite a bit for this list, I did not end up putting him on. Also, another big shocker to me, another person that was fighting for that final spot on the cast, I did not put on Caleb. And again, Caleb was on my initial draft this list. I did fully think Caleb was going to make it on this cast. Again, Jeff very much praised him on the On Fire podcast. He was talking about how Caleb was just such a shoo-in to make the cast, and how one of the most charismatic people, and clearly loved his underdog arc on the season, to where I think we're at least going second chance style people. I feel like Caleb is definitely very high on his radar. I think there's a lot of reasons why Caleb would make the cut here. Yeah, I just feel like the likes of Jesse, and again, some from the following season, just felt like they made a bit more sense to me than Caleb. So Caleb didn't make it on. Now for the people that I did put on, starting it off with the winner of the season in D. And again, this is the one I think you could debate. Yeah, I think obviously D being on the On Fire podcast is something to definitely boon her, to where D is someone that I didn't really get the sense that he loved D by the end of 45, to where I remember this moment on the On Fire podcast where Rick Devens called D the best player of the new era, and Jeff just kind of ignored responding to that, to where, again, I think there's definitely some question marks there. Yeah, again, I think considering the time they just spent doing the On Fire podcast together, I definitely see where she makes the cut now. Another person I put on, again, pretty obvious pick here. Again, one that he has openly says one of his favorite players of all time, that is Emily. And again, I think Emily for a Dreamcast like this for Jeff, pretty obvious. He loved Emily's arc on the season. Again, openly said that she is one of his favorite players. I don't see why she wouldn't be here. Now again, I think Emily is essentially here over the likes of like an Evie and over the likes of like a Sierra, where I could see him kind of fitting the similar mold. Yeah, at the end of the day, I feel like Emily is someone that, again, we just have so much proof that Jeff wants to see Emily play again. So again, she made the cut here. The final person that made the cut here was someone that was a last second addition. This is someone that in my initial draft, they were not on the cast. However, I think there's a little bit more evidence more recently, which points to them probably being on it. And that person is Kelly, who is someone that Jeff just seems to really like. And to be honest, I don't really get why
she just seems kind of fine to me. And he really hypes up her blind side, one of the best moments of that season. And also talk about how, like, when he met her, she was like an obvious person to go on the show, and how she became like an alternate 44 because they met her at the last second, but her previous cycle because they met her too late. Yeah, she was such an obvious person to be on the cast. So again, I think he very much likes Kelly.
Though again, she is someone that very much teetered the line of whether or not she would make it on the cast. Though by the end, I did feel like there's enough justifications for her being here over some other names that he hasn't really talked about as much recently, to where that's why Kelly makes it on here.
Finally, we're moving on to 46, where, again, we got some contenders for sure. Only 2 people made the cut. Yeah, again, I think you obviously consider Kenzie the winner, who, and he was pretty high on. Yeah, again, at the end of the day, just did not make the cut. I also consider Charlie someone that he also very much praised. I could see Charlie being kind of his like new Spencer. Yeah, again, at the end of the day, did not make the cut for me. Also, I did consider Maria, who also he praised quite a bit. Now, not to the same degree as the people that did make the cut in the likes of like Carla or Andrea, but still, again, someone he did praise. Yeah, I decided to go with them over her. Also, I very much consider Tiffany, where Tiffany was definitely someone fighting for a spot here. Yeah, again, I just felt like Drea and Carla were a bit more locks than her, to where she didn't make the cut. Also considered Hunter, where obviously Hunter is fighting with Jonathan for this spot here, where, again, I could see a world where he picks Hunter over Jonathan right now. Yeah, I just feel like he was so over the top in his love of Jonathan at the time of 42 that wasn't really matched with Hunter, to where while he very much likes Hunter, I feel like it wasn't this over glorification that there was of Jonathan at the time, to where, again, I went with Jonathan instead of Hunter. Yeah, I could see a world where he picks Hunter instead now. But the people that did make the cut here, again, are the people I've been saying in a lot of these other casting videos. And first up, you got Q. Just obvious. Again, he was very much praising Q as like one of the most unique people to ever play the game, to where I could definitely see him looking at Q as like the modern coach, as this like really over the top, larger than life character that kind of needs to come back, to where I do feel like Q is very high on his board. And the other person I think he would pick here, again, someone that I don't know is particularly high on most people's radars, yet again, someone that Jeff clearly loves, and that is Tevin. So again, Jeff literally said on the On Fire podcast that if he could have a Tevin every season, he would, to where, again, I think it's very clear. Tevin is very high on his board and constantly praised him throughout the season. Really went out of his way to justify all the moves Tevin made in the game, even though they were bad for his game. Well, also beyond that, again, constantly talks about his singing and talked about like how far they had to go out of their way to put it on the show, to where, again, I think he clearly loves Tevin, to where, again, clearly Tevin's very high on his radar, to where, again, he was a very easy pick here. But there we go. I mean, that is the entirety of Jeff Probst's dream cast, where running through the people that made the cut here, we do have Boston Rob Mariano, we have Sri Fields, Parvati Shallow, John Cochran, Ben Drebergen, Angelina Keeley, Christian Hubicki, Rick Devens, Drea Wheeler, Jonathan Young, Marian Okech, Carla Cruz Godoy,
Jesse Lopez,
Carolyn Weiger, Jam Jam Arroyo,
Ellie Nalbandian,
Emily Flippin, Dee Valderas, Hugh Burdett, and Tevin Davis. So again, I think that's who Jeff Probst would ideally want on his cast. Or again, obviously not specifically limiting it to any theme, just again a group of 20 people that I think would be top of mind for Jeff if he were to have to put a cast together on his own volition, to where with that, again, that's another redo of a casting video crossed off the list. To be honest, not entirely sure how many more of these I'm going to do, where I don't think there's really that much of a point in redoing my like nightmare cast for Jeff Probst video, and in general, I also don't feel like there's many other casting videos worth really redoing, though I'm sure there'll be a couple here and there. So again, stay tuned for those whenever they come. And also just outside of that, expect the typical style of content you can expect from the channel. But for now, that's the video. Thank you for watching.